Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Andy Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Matthew Connor. Hi, Matthew.
Hi.
It's great to have you here.
Great to be
And
here.
I'm excited about our conversation today because we're going to talk about cybersecurity. And, we are all about processes. So we're going to discuss what is the correct process for businesses to have in order to protect themselves, not protect, defend themselves against any attacks. And you have a very, very unique approach to the subject, and you're very passionate about it as well. So that's why I'm so excited for this interview. And I am also would like to give a big shout out to Rich Walker, who introduced us. And I did a fantastic interview with Rich, which I'm going to include in the show notes for this episode, so our listeners can hear it. And Rich is a fantastic entrepreneur, and he shared great wisdom and great, we talked all about processes, and he shared how processes helped him grow his business and how he helps many more people and was able to run the business successfully because of that. So it's a fascinating episode, and I would recommend everyone to listen to it. So thank you, Rich, for this introduction. And Matthew, let me introduce you properly with a bio, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so you are a U.S. Army interrogator. Yep. And you turned entrepreneur, and you started CyberLynx 14 years ago. Mm-hmm. And you've grown it from a small town IT company to a nationwide managed cybersecurity service provider that you defend US-based businesses against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That's right.
That is quite the statement. One of the best mission statements articulated one of the best articulated mission statements that I've heard. You definitely know what you're doing, and it seems like you're very determined to do it as well. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So tell us first, what got you from being an Army interrogator to becoming an entrepreneur and starting your own company?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess it started back when I was a teenager. When I was a kid, my dad brought home, and now this is going way back into the 80s. My dad brought home a computer, and it literally does nothing. It fires up into BASIC, which is a programming language, and it came with a manual. And if you wanted it to do anything, you had to program it. So I started programming, and I'd save all my money that I'd earned from whatever, cutting grass and doing stuff, and my brothers would always come and borrow money from me. So one of the first programs I wrote was was ATM. I don't know if you know, the ATM machine just had recently come out at the time. So I wrote my own, so my brothers could go in there, put in their PIN.
I have to ask, was that a Commodore 64 you were writing, or an Apple C2?
It was an IBM 8088.
Okay.
But we did have the Commodore 64, which is great. Nice throwback. Very nice. And so they go up and they plug in their PIN number, and they put in how much they wanted to borrow, and it'd print out the list of their interest, their payments, and everything. And then they'd bring it to me. I'd be like, okay. And I'd lend them the money. And so my dad, who designed electronic circuit boards, he saw this and was like, hey, we could use some programming at my company. And so then I spent my nights and weekends in junior high and high school slinging code for all these different companies. And so I joined the Army because, my dad was a brilliant engineer, but a very poor businessman. And so, he never really, figured it out. And I learned a million, ways to succeed by doing doing the opposite of what dad does. Like, he's like, oh, that's clearly a mistake. Great. So that really helped me in business to see that growing up, versus having the example of what to do. I had I had the opposite. And I was like, what not to do? Okay, don't do that. Don't do that. There's better ways to do it. But in any event, so because that was such a demanding way to start, I escaped that life of servitude there and joined the army. And they taught me Mandarin, Chinese, and Spanish as an interrogator, and it was just great. But then that, after about 10 years of doing that, I had a wife and kids at the time, and you don't make much money in the army, and so what we did was I got out, and I started I started an IT service company, and one thing kind of led to another, and then we became CyberLynx, and we've grown from a little kind of small town IT company helping small businesses. And it's so much fun. You help a small business with their IT, and it's very rewarding. It makes a difference. They need the assistance. And so we still have our very first client today, which is nice after after 14 years. And yet we've grown into a much bigger company that it really is focused now on defending our country's businesses against all these they are enemies. They're coming after your business, their money, their way of life. And so yeah, it's nice. And when I realized that the mission, what I loved about being in the army was that mission of you're there keeping people safe, even if you're not going to battle. Just the act of being there is a deterrent, and it's an important one that we have. Great. It keeps everybody safe. And so I've always kind of, for whatever reason, that's always struck a chord with me. And so I didn't realize, it took me, I don't know, 12 years before I realized that that's exactly what we're doing with CyberLynx. That's what really gets me excited about it, is that mission, because that's exactly what we do every day. And I think with the cyber threats becoming so much more prevalent now, that it's really become obvious that that's what we're doing. Because now the stakes are real. It used to be like, oh, keep the computer running. Oh, it's not starting. Oh, I got a virus. It was nothing. That was, it impeded productivity, but it didn't threaten the business's existence. Now the cyber threats threaten your existence. People get into your email, and they get in between wire transfers, and we're talking hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars in wire transfers that go to the bad guy instead of to your business or to the client. And the messed up part is, there's no help for that. There's no insurance. Your insurance probably won't cover it. You're out that money, and both ends are, the client and the business. No matter which way the money was going, they're all out the money. And so it hurts both sides. In any event, it gets very very real very fast now, because the bad guys have gotten really good. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a whole another game now.
Oh, it is. It is. So we have many entrepreneurs are listening to us right now, small, medium-sized businesses growing fast. Those are the people that we serve, are fast-growing companies that are lacking consistency. And you know how it is. You're growing fast, you add more employees, you have less time to train, to onboard. I mean, that's obviously why we help them with, but we have an entrepreneur right now that's sitting there. They're already overwhelmed. And now that threat of cyber attack, the threat of listening to what's happening, they definitely want to defend themselves and protect themselves and defend themselves. What is your recommendation, or what is your process or recommendation for a process for those entrepreneurs? What is the first thing that they should do?
Yeah, so it's actually really easy. We have almost I don't want to say a done for you, but it's a fully managed solution, where what you need is, unlike in years past where it was a virus and everybody was worried about getting a virus, right? A virus is really nothing. It's like the polio, right? Its whole thing is that it can self-replicate. It doesn't even mean that it's harmful. It's just code that can replicate itself. And now it has two of those. Very cool. And it can spread. Okay, it's a cute trick, but that's really all it is. It's not a harmful thing. Now the cyber threat is very, very much different. And what we have to work on now is getting to where we have much better than antivirus on a computer, but an endpoint detection and response. So what that is it's this AI-backed security application, like Sentinel-1, for instance. I think everybody's heard of CrowdStrike. And the problem with CrowdStrike is its fundamentals weren't great. And that's the beauty of Sentinel-1. It uses AI to watch what's happening on the computer. So if something bad happens, let's say your Carbonite backup you're using suddenly starts encrypting files. Well, that's not right. So even if the bad guys have gotten into Carbonite, they hacked into Carbonite, they injected their code into at the source into Carbonite, it gets pushed out, and now Carbonite starts doing weird stuff. Sentinel-1's going to say, wait, that's not right. Carbonite is doing something weird. Let me stop this. Let me wind it back and ask a grown-up if this should be happening. And so that's really powerful stuff. And so one, it's this very powerful tool that you need somebody to be able to supervise it, unlike antivirus, which could just like run on any computer. And it's like, yeah, I caught the virus, I caught the malware. Now you're talking about advanced stuff that you need, kind of a cybersecurity technician to set it up properly and monitor it, which is great. And these things are very affordable. Like they're shockingly affordable. So for a few dollars a month, you've got now AI defending you against the bad guys who are now using AI. Because in years past, it was like, oh, I know this is a BS email because their English is all broken and garbage. So I don't have to worry about it. I know this is bad. Well, now that, thanks to ChatGPT, not in a bad way, we all just have to start, move along with technology. But because they have access to that, their emails are perfect. The English is great. And they use it even for their software. So their scripts are better. And so we need to use we got to use AI to fight AI, right? You fight fire with fire. So the first thing is you get an advanced endpoint detection and response, an EDR on your machines, right? It just replaces your antivirus. You can think of it as a next generation antivirus. It's AI backed, it's powerful, it's fantastic. And then on top of that, what you need to do, and we were talking about this, just a little bit ago before the podcast, is I don't know if you know this, but on your computer, like a million things are going on. When you look at the logs, there's tons of data of things that are happening on each computer. Like great, but then your email accounts, you've got every time somebody logs in or does something. Let's say you use Microsoft, right? You're using Microsoft for your email. There's a million login, I guess, instances in the logs, right? Like the logs they fill up. And so every day, for instance, Microsoft has trillions of logged events at Microsoft, trillions. And so for your account, let's say you're a small business, you've got 5 employees or 10, doesn't matter. You've got a few employees. Even in that small, what they call tenant in your Microsoft, account, you'll have, dozens, if not hundreds of logged events. And if you're not a trained technician to look at that, it's crazy. You have no idea what that even means. So it's all gobbledygook to the average person. So what you need is something, someone to be able to take those logs, sift through them automatically, use AI to sort through it and be like, hey, wait, let's say, Adi just logged in, in Lithuania, 15 minutes after she logged in Chicago. You can't get from Chicago to Lithuania in 15 minutes. So I'm going to, throw a flag on that. I'm going to stop it and call a grown up for help. So that's the great thing. And having this go 24/7 is really what you need, because we've seen time and time. We've had, I would say in the last year, we've had things that used to be considered science fiction are now science fact. For instance, we had a client in the financial services industry who it was 3-4 o'clock in the morning. They log in using multi-factor authentication, they got the code from their email account, and they logged in at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I think it was Lithuania. It was something like that. It was, in that area. And so we called him up, and she was like, I'm asleep. This is not, I didn't do it. I was like, well, you used you got texted a code and you used that code. She's like, no, I did get it. I've been asleep. So what happened was, and so in doing the analysis here, her phone, like just like in the movies where they're like, oh, we'll just clone their phone, and they just get close and they're okay, we're getting all the phone calls and all the texts, right? Which was like okay. You know, it's kind of like
I
in
hear
the
in my
movies where
head, you
like,
know what I hear? I hear the Mission Impossible music. That's where
yeah,
it comes
exactly.
on.
It's
That's when it
just like
comes
in Mission
on.
Impossible. Yep,
Yeah,
just
that's
like that.
right. That's right. Even the last one was about the AI, the entity. Absolutely, yes. So,
Yep.
but
And
those are
so
great examples. So we do need. But one thing I was thinking in terms of the process is that you have to respond to it fast. So you have the the first step is to put something in the back, like a gatekeeper, basically an AI gatekeeper. Then you have an analysis of the data, because the data is only as good as it being analyzed. But then, as you said, you need a grown-up to ask, an adult, a human, actually, that's a human, HI, human
yep.
intelligence, to
Hmm.
actually decipher and make sure that it is something that it is a threat. But then we have to act fast on it. We can't just be asleep, not like the example of the lady sleeping, but we can't just like, oh, okay, well, I'll get to it. Like, you have to jump on it immediately. That should be part of the
Well,
process.
this is what's interesting. So yes and no. So
Tell
the
me.
time for what we found is that hackers are, depending on the size of the organization and what the, you know, so a larger organization, they'll be in the network and the organization much longer, 6 months to a year, as long as. So they've infiltrated the network, and then they spend this time moving across the network, gathering data, figuring it all out, mapping it all out, and figuring out their most, you know, valuable approach for them. For a smaller organization, it's days to weeks, right? So it's not, that's the interesting part, is it, you would think that, oh, this is going to be immediate. The hackers they've got time and they know it. So what they're trying not to do is they're trying to tread lightly and carefully. So they get in and they make sure that they've not, you know, it's kind of like home security. You've got you had maybe you had ADT, you know, on your, but they didn't, or maybe you didn't have ADT because you don't have anybody watching your stuff, but you've got all your doors and windows locked. But they cut the window open nicely. They open it up. They move in quietly. They don't have to rush. They're not like rushing to get your stuff. It's not like a smash and grab. They move in quietly. They hide. They wait. You've got time. So did we have to call her at 4 o'clock in the morning? No, but you know, I think it's smart to. And so even if you wait until that next morning, which is when a lot of the work got done anyways, at 4 o'clock in the morning, it was like, okay, we're shutting off your account, go back to sleep. The damage is we've mitigated the damage. And then in the morning, we'll get it all squared away once you're awake. We're not trying to make people function at 4 o'clock in the morning, right?
No, and
But
that was not my intent either. I was basically, if you get a call, so within 24 hours or a certain amount, point being is in your process of doing it, just allocate a time, a specific time. Now we
that's right.
know that it doesn't have to be drop everything, but within 24 hours answer. Don't just ignore it and brush it aside, because that's where the problem can come in, because it's only as good as you act on it, right?
Yeah, and that's why it's great to have these processes in place. So I mean, going back to your point, the process is you've got to have great endpoint, you know, detection and response. So a great EDR like Sentinel-1 on all your devices. Boom, check. You know, that's a few dollars a month. Fantastic. And then you've got to have all of the logs from all of your systems. So it could be your Microsoft, your box, you know, or you use Dropbox, or all of these things. Your Sentinel-1 ties into it, your computers, your networks, all these things go back to what they call a SIM, which is basically a big it's a really cool device that collects all the logs and monitors it. And so what we have is the operation is called a security operations center at the SOC. That's kind of like, you know, the NASA headquarters type, where you see all the monitors and everything's going on. That you've got to have something like that in place to monitor all of that and get flagged for those alerts and be like, okay, great. Now the grown up, the cybersecurity technician, can see it, take action, because there's also, you know, plenty of false alarms, like, oh no, that's nothing, we're not going to, we don't need to bother them with that. Yep, that's weird, but it's not, you know, it's nothing to worry about. And so it's very helpful to have that. And that's also, that sounds very, very expensive. We're talking a few dollars a month per employee. So for a few dollars a month per employee, you've got everything in place where you've got, you know, your security at, you know, really the highest level that you need. You know, you think about it like Fort Knox, right? If you had, just going back to Mission Impossible with the lasers and all the kind, you can spend all of your money and then some on security. That's not the right answer. The right answer is, how do you balance security, you know, your spend on security to get, you know, and still be protected and productive and profitable. So it's finding that mix. And I think for especially in small and medium-sized business, it's that EDR and the SOC monitoring that. Boom, you're golden. That's it. A few dollars a month per employee, you've got it covered. And I think most people worry that it's, you start thinking, you hear cyber and you instantly think cha-ching, expensive. And that's not the case. And I think that would be the message I'd like to get across to people is it's surprisingly affordable for every business. So even if you're a 1-2 person business, almost more so, it becomes more important because your reputation you're trying to build. And a lot of times you don't want to spend the extra money because you're small and you want to, get things going. That's when it's the most important. I mean, it's just as important for a small business as a large to protect your business and your reputation, because who can do business with somebody who's going to have these sorts of problems and could bring them down? Because again, you get that business email compromise and all that money's gone. Everybody's out legally. It's a very gray area as to who's liable. And so you end up both just eating half of it most of the time, or it goes to litigation and then you end up eating half of it. It's a mess.
Totally. I can totally see that. Okay, so then what should we include in terms of the process, in terms of internal behavior when it comes to cybersecurity?
So the other thing that I would say is because the weakest link is the end user, I mean, almost always it is 80-ish% of all cyber incidences involve a human screwing up, right? And so that's really tough. So I think having good training is really important. So we have this really great video kind of series where it's these 1-minute video clips every week. You get this very entertaining. I mean, it's one of these things where people talk about it throughout the week because it's funny, it's entertaining, it's actually surprisingly good, and now it's top of mind. It's like, oh, that's a thing, and so you have to keep nobody, when you hear the word cybersecurity, for most people, it's not exciting. They don't get excited like, oh, yay, cybersecurity. Ugh. I mean, if you make cookies for a living, you get excited about cookies. You don't get excited about cybersecurity. So I don't blame you. It's So the cybersecurity training that, like, let's say you went to get cyber insurance, right? You want to be protected in case something happens financially. You want that, like, the hoops that they make you jump through, they're expensive. And one of them is going to be, you've got to have annual cybersecurity training. The problem with that is nobody remembers that hour-long boring class that they were in. 5 minutes later, they may remember one thing. An hour or a day later, they remember virtually nothing from it. So keeping that top of mind. So I'd say for processes, because the weakest link is your employees and the people in your organization, you want to have a way of educating them that's entertaining, that makes them understand it. Cybersecurity doesn't have to be a fearful thing. You don't have to fear the expense, and you don't have to fear the bad guys. It's one of these things where it's like, oh, that's bad. What do we do about it? How do we mitigate this? Great. And can we do it in a nice, fun way? Oh, fantastic. Great. And then it's just great all the way around. So that's really what you want to do. And again, that's like, that training is like $1 a person. And now you're golden, versus you pay some, no matter how entertaining somebody tries to be, if they stand up in front of you, even if it's on a Zoom, to try to educate you about cybersecurity, for an hour or an hour and a half, nobody's going to remember it. So I love those little bite-sized pieces. So for processes, I'd say start with education, get the EDR in place, and then you can put in processes of say, hey, if it's a fishy email, I'd say if you're not 100% sure, just delete it. Don't open it. Don't click on it. Just delete. And if it's important, they'll email you back, or they'll call and be like, why didn't you check out my email? Well, it looked fishy, Bob. That's why. That's why I didn't open it. And so then they'll send less fishy emails next time. Or they'll tell you, that, oh, big process. So here, this one. So yes, for businesses, those are important things to do. But when it comes to process, I think one of the most important things you can do today to help protect your company is set up the process to say, anytime we're talking about money via email, the let's say it's the finance person or whatever, you're going to call them from your Rolodex, you're using the number that you have for them. You call them to confirm, hey, this is what we're doing. So let's say it's an ACH, transfer, or it's a change of payroll, whatever it is, or the CEO emails you and says, hey, I need you to send $1,000 to so and so, or whatever it is. Great. You call the CEO from the number that you have for them and say, hey, I just need to confirm that that's what you want to do. And great, totally fine. But that needs to be the process, period. Anytime there's any change with money whatsoever, or a new, thing with money, it needs to be, confirmed via voice by you calling them, not they called you. Because here's the other bad thing that people are starting to understand is we can now completely fake somebody's voice and their phone number. So if they call you, even though it comes up with the same number, it's the CEO, it's their phone number, it's their voice. They said, do it. I say, great, boom, done. Nope, that doesn't work, because that can be faked completely. So the process has to be you call them with their number and confirm, and you can put in safe, into safe words. I don't think you have to go that far right now, because that process should be enough for external providers, external partners, internal employees, bosses, the whole 9 yards. That's the process. It'll save you, it'll save your company.
Absolutely. That should be the last part of the process. And we have the education, but also implement measures that are innovative. But I mean, basically keep top of mind, stay in the know, stay ahead of technology. So as an example, because now we can simulate a number and a voice and it sounds the same, make sure that now you call out, when
Yes.
that gets somehow handled by AI and it's no longer there, you have to keep current, you have to keep in front of ahead of technology, and make sure that you revise the process accordingly, so you always are a step ahead in order to prevent fraud and prevent being
Can I throw in another
Of
great
course.
freebie? So there's a couple other really the completely free processes that are going to help you. So that one's a huge one. Another great one is have on your email, you have to have a notice that says, hey, you don't often get emails from so and so. And this is important, and you got to tell people, hey, look, that's an important notice. Now, first time you get an email from Bob, it's going to say, hey, you don't often get emails from Bob at bob.com. Cool, fine. You know that because that's the first time you're talking about. But if you're always talking to Bob and suddenly your email says, you don't often get an email from Bob. Wait, what? I get an email from Bob like twice a day. In fact, I'm tired of hearing from Bob. Why are you saying this? Because what's important here is that a lot of times the bad guys will get an email address or a domain name very, very similar, and it will even look identical to that. So you can use simply a different character often in it that looks like the same A, but it's a different A, but to the human it looks like A. So it's Bob at whatever it is, and it looks exactly the same, or it's slightly off. They put a hyphen in and you wouldn't have noticed it because it's like Bob Inc, but Bob hyphen Inc, you wouldn't think twice about it, but the computer will, and so it tells you, hey, you don't often get it. So that one will save you nicely. Costs nothing to do. You just have it set up in your email and it's going to save you great. Those two I think are huge. Every company can do it for free. Do those two things.
Absolutely. And Matthew, I also want to emphasize what you said before, make it fun. Don't make it serious. Don't make it like something people are, oh, now we have to go and study, but to learn about cybersecurity, but make it so people want and expect and anticipate the next video, the next educational moment, and then they will absorb it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really hard to learn something that's dry and boring and isn't your passion. I mean, like, for some people, stamp collecting is a very exciting thing. For a lot of people, they're like, how is that exciting? Right. And so if it's not your thing, there's got to be a way to make it really entertaining and engaging for employees, because it is so important to the company's survival. So I think you're spot on. It's got to be entertaining. It can't just be fearful. I mean, if you're doing it all out of fear, that's no way to live. And cybersecurity can be, we get a lot of fear mongers in this industry, and it doesn't have to be that way. I think a lot of people think that that's how you convince somebody to do it. I don't like that. I don't think that's right. Yes, there's a lot at stake, and yes, it can take down your business if you don't take it seriously. But the reality is, you can really take a very positive approach to that same thing. Defense of your company is a positive thing, not a scary thing. Like, how do we make this is a vulnerability? Let's make it strong. Let's make it a strength, right? And let's do it in the best, most economical way possible. And that, again, I think there are so many free and inexpensive ways of doing that. And we're happy to help anybody kind of go through that, even in the free ones. Because again, our mission is really to help, defend and protect, the nation's small and medium businesses from enemies, foreign and domestic. And it doesn't cost a lot. So do it in a
So
fun
Matthew,
way.
if people want to reach out to you, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. Super easy to find. But cyberlynx.com, cyberlynx.com. And I'm Matt at CyberLynx. I'm always available, and can get me anytime.
That's fantastic. So now we're almost at the end of this podcast, but I have to ask, we're all about processes. Why do you think processes are important for businesses?
I mean, without a process, you're not really a business. I mean, just think about it. If any, you don't even function without a process. And I think people kind of conflate process with like a formal process. If there's no process, even informally, you're not functioning. It's all haphazard. It's chaos. So you have to have that process. And if you're going to have a process, you should formalize it and tweak it and make it as efficient as possible so that it runs smoothly. So when people are doing it, they're not wasting their brain power trying to reinvent the wheel every time they're doing something. And it really helps go from that mom and pop organization, where you're just kind of figuring it out and it's all, loosey goosey, to a finely tuned machine that is really doing the job really well. Because the reality is, people enjoy being good at stuff. And if you give them the process, a good formalized process, they can be great at it. And it helps the whole company be great. And that's where people really enjoy what they're doing, because they're great at it. People love what they're good at. You don't love something that you're bad at. If you do, you'll be good at it and you'll be great at it in no time because you love that thing. So that's why I think, for me, that's why processes are so important, because it's what gives the people in the organization, it's what empowers them to be great and have a great day. When they go in and they're like, bam, 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 and they're just doing it and they're crushing, they feel good because they crushed it. And that doesn't mean, not, and it's funny because in our field, not everything can be systematized. You can, but like every problem, we help people and everything's kind of unique, but there's processes to that. So yeah, you still get to have the fun of like, oh, this is a new one. And so you get to play Sherlock Holmes and solve the mystery, but there's a process to that. And that's where people can really be empowered and feel great because they're knocking those out and doing a great job. So that's why I think process is so important.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Matthew, it's been a pleasure having you on this podcast. Thank you so much for all the knowledge and sharing the free tips and building the process. We're going to create a blog based on this process so people can read it and implement it. And of course, reach out to you for help to implement those tools that are so important in order to defend their business and everything that is important for them.
Love it. Well, thanks for having me on.
Okay, so until next time, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.